Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, I actually have a before we vote on this, or before I make my comments about the non-utility capital borrowing here. I actually have a couple of questions for Mr. Reichert, if I would be able to ask him.
Mr. Reichert.
This actually pertains to some of the concerns that Mr. DiGiacinto had brought up both today in discussing this and at the Finance Committee meeting. In 2009, how much debt did we pay off?
18.5 million.
Is 18.5 million the principal and the interest?
Correct.
What, just other than the interest, what do we pay off in the principal?
10.5.
10.5 million. And the number that had come up, as in the Finance Committee meeting last week, as far as the shortfall in the audit, what was that number? The 8.5 million, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
When I was taking a look at this and thinking about this borrowing, and I thought about that 10.5 million, and that's what the budget number was, and I was just making sure that's accurate, that we did pay off that plus interest.
Yes.
When I took a look at that, and I thought about it, and some of the concerns that Mr. DiGiacinto and others have raised about the financial position of the city in 2009, and I thought about the fact that just in principal alone, we paid off $10.5 million in 2009. And when you take a look at that $8.5 million number, and you look at the idea that 1.2 of that was money that we were owed, and you look at the fact that even if we ended 2009 with a shortfall of 7.2 million, which you get the 8.5 minus the 1.3, you get 7.3 million. You look at the principal that we paid off in 2009 of $10.5 million. Okay, so overall, as far as paying our debt was concerned, it was actually $3 million. We paid off $3 million more in debt than we took on in 2009. Obviously, there were things that we weren't happy about in 2009 as far as the revenue shortfalls are concerned. And we could do what Harrisburg, and we know the federal government does this, where we take on much more debt every year. And we didn't take on any new debt in 2009, did we?
No.
And we could push it off, and we could this debt that we're paying off, and once again, that was council even from before I was on with Mr. Donchez and Councilman Dolan and Councilman Belinsky and Councilman Maurer that had urged the administration and council to pay off more and more of that debt every year, that we didn't want to carry that on. When I take a look at that, and I think about the idea that we could have pushed this off to 2015, we could push our debt off to 2015, we could push our debt off to 2016, 2020, 2025. We could make our kids pay for our debt. When you look at the amount of kids that came here tonight to talk about the ice rink, we could do what other governments do and push off that debt and push it off onto their backs to when they become adults, when they become taxpayers. But what we do is we aggressively pay off our debt. And the city more aggressively pays off our debt now than used to, and that's a credit to the people in City Council, and that's a credit to this administration for making an effort to pay off that debt more aggressively. So when I take a look at it that way, and it's not been portrayed that way, and you know what, it took some thinking, going back and taking a look at those budgets, think about this, and thinking where did the situation come from? And then I think about the debt that we've paid off, and I'm thinking, wait a second, we paid off more debt in 2009 than we took on. We paid off more debt in 2008 than we took on, so on and so forth. I take a look at that, and I combine that with the cuts that the department heads have come forward with to you guys, the cuts and the amount of money we're going to save with the proposed vacancies, with the possibility of early retirement. And I think to myself, when I take a look at these projects, and I did suggest at that Finance Committee getting it down to $5 million, and the administration cut almost $1 million from it, and we went over it at the Finance Committee, and I went and I talked to the department heads, and I took a look, do we need each one of these projects? Just in my own opinion. I talked to other members of council, and I said, are these projects that we need? And in my opinion, and I'm hopeful that the rest of council feels this way. We need these projects. There's a new EMS facility in here. There's money that we need for projects to help kind of do work that's not even just routine maintenance. I've talked to Mr. Alcohol, I've talked to Mr. Carp, and they say that there's more that needs to be done, but that they'll do what we absolutely need to do. So when I take a look at this $5.8 million, it's lower than previous borrowings. I can't say off the top of my head what the borrowing was, what the last two borrowings were. I don't know if you know what they are, Mr. Record. What was the last borrowing?
07 was
Jim Ryder.
9.4 in 07, 7.5 in 09.
Okay. So when I take a look at the fact that we're taking out less money for projects we absolutely need, as well as when we take a look at our financial picture, that we're paying off more debt now than I would reckon most other governments would. And I think about the fact that we are doing what we think we need to do in 2010. We understand going forward we need to make changes, we need to make some tough choices, but at the same time we are being aggressive in paying off debt, which is a result, as I said, of members on this council that were here before I was, as well as the administration, and we're making the tough choices. So I personally feel comfortable with this $5.8 million borrowing, and I plan to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Mr. Evans, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did support this at the committee. I'll be supporting it again tonight. When I looked at it, just to make my comments brief, it was a lot of difficult decisions to make, and I want to commend the administration and the department heads for making the cuts that we asked for, as many as possible. What was kept on this proposal in this borrowing sheet are things like cardiac monitors, the EMS, or the 911 upgrades that are mandated that we need to do. That's not really a question do we want to do or not, they need to be made. Keeping up with the roads, the department had asked for about $1.5 million, really keep up the roads around the city. And he was given about less than half of that. So we want to keep the city, keep it nice, and we're on a strained budget. We know we're in some difficult financial situations we're attempting to work through. So I do believe it was cut as thin as possible. Last year, under the plan was to borrow $8 million. That was cut to 6.6, it's now cut to 5. And I had the numbers available because I was going to mention the fact this is quite lower than the previous two borrowings, which is a good trend. This is a note that's taken out every other year. Every other year one matures and goes away, and we put a new one on the books. Hopefully it's less than what went on. So that's a good trend. The EMS facility is something Mr. Reynolds mentioned. It's a new one, and yet, it's another one of those items I think just about every citizen should be able to see it. These are the people, the men and women who are out saving our lives and lives of the citizens all over the city. And if you could walk through and see where they're working, and most of you couldn't point out where it's at or have been through it to know what it looks like, you might be appalled by the conditions they work in. So these are all needed. There is no fluff in this. I feel comfortable it's been cut back to the 5.8. I wish it could be lower. When I looked on it, there was nothing that I could say, boy, that can't be put off, or do we really need those cardiac monitors? I think we do. I think we do need the facility and the other upgrades or the street repairs to keep the city in the order that we would all like it to be in. So I will be voting yes tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Nolan?
As Councilman Reynolds said, aggressive debt reduction hasn't always been the habit in Bethlehem, but it has been the mission of this administration, and I think we can be very comfortable that that will continue. And yes, councils passed, but not too far past, but councils passed, and this council, I think, will continue to support aggressive debt reduction. I just second everything that has been said by Councilman Reynolds and Councilman Evans. I want to add one other thing, and that's that the worst thing that a government can do during recessions is shut down, is not take care of what it needs to take care of. Can you imagine visitors coming to Bethlehem and the EMS is non-functional, somebody thinking about moving here, or a corporation thinking about moving here, and EMS is completely dysfunctional because the structure that they have is falling down. It's awful. We have to keep up those important things in the city, and I know debt for some people is just a plain old dirty word, But in actuality, it can be a very effective way of paying for long-term projects that are going to outlive the life of the debt. It's smart to do it if you do it correctly. And I think here in Bethlehem, by paying off our debt aggressively, that's exactly what we're doing. So I'll support it.
Thank you, Mr. DiGiacenzo.
I'm not going to try to debate this, Mr. President, but I'm going to make 5 points. We have an overburdened amount of the debt in the city, okay? We have to make the debt payments, okay? We have to make them. Making the debt payments contribute to our cash constraints and paying bills that we have trouble every year with, okay? And by the way, we did refinance twice this year already, which does extend those debt payments out. And we also have an $8.2 million line of credit we took out this year, which we haven't tapped yet, I don't believe, but it's pretty much debt also, so.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Evans?
I believe, I'm not sure, I'll share. I think though, when we refinanced though too, that we kept the term, we didn't extend it. We were the same term, just took advantage of an interest, am I correct on that? Yeah. It was just, so we flipped it.
I know the one was short.
Took advantage of it. Yeah, we kept it the same, so we paid off and matured at the same time.
Thank you.
We just took advantage of it. If I
Go right ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Just we can take advantage of a lower interest rate, we did not extend the term. And we do have $60 million less debt today than 2004. The only thing I want to point out, because a lot of focus is often put on the number that's borrowed, but I think it's also important to point out this particular borrowing is structured in an 11-year payoff. And in the past, we have done cities, in the city, 15 and 20-year payoff. So, I'll use the case of the EMS facility as a case in point. The useful life of that asset is going to be far beyond 11 years. And it could be as much as 20, 30, 40 years, depending, time will tell. But the point is that we will be paying for this asset in 11 years and not stretching out over 15, 20, and 30 years as we could. And that is a savings in the long run for the taxpayers. And so the last few issues that we have done in the city have been 11 and 12-year borrowings. And so those debt, Mr. DiGiacenzo, you're correct in saying that those debt payments are obligated, but we don't have to set the terms at 11 and 12 years. We've chosen to set the terms and tighten that up so that, and not spread that debt over a longer period of time. And over the course of the loan, you pay less in interest. So that's what when we say we're aggressively paying down debt, we're not taking these borrowings and stretching them out over a longer period of time, even though if you look at the useful life of the asset that the borrowing is supporting, you could. And that is why we pay down more debt in a 2-year period of time than we take on, and that's why over the course of the last 6 years, we've been able to lower the overall debt in the city.
Mr. President?
Final comment.
All right. I also said in the Finance Committee meeting that I would be amenable to looking at debt later on this year during the budget time or during the normal time. I didn't say no debt, okay? So, but it's still a fact. The debt payments that we do need to make do constrain our cash. It puts us in a very difficult position, and we're going to add some debt service here earlier than normal. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Go right ahead.
I was wondering if anyone in the administration had a comment on the idea of why September 14th and not holding off, as
Mr. Riker?
Councilman DiGiacenzo mentions.
Well, first of all, you can talk a lot about the rate, so the rate's going to get better, and the rate's going to get worse. I don't know that, but I do know that 3.55% is a really, really good rate, and you need to jump on that. Number two, we want to get started quickly on the EMS building, which is going to start this year. That's $800,000, and we want to get the upgrade done in the 911, which is $2 million. So that's 45% of this bond issue is pulling right out the door. Number three, there's going to probably be a default in the city of Harrisburg of a major bond payment that's due, about $69 million. In conversations that we've had with S&P and others, it could affect the market here in Pennsylvania. It could affect not only the bond market, but the lending of money. That's quite a bogey to